So we're going to start talking about the pelvic floor. So as you may or may not know, I am a huge fan of the pelvic floor. I love teaching the pelvic floor. Learning about the pelvic floor was pivotal for me, not only as a coach, but also as a woman who's had babies and had my own struggles in the past. So when I first started learning about the pelvic floor and about postpartum coaching, it was because I was currently in postpartum, the newly postpartum stage. I like to say postpartum is forever, but I was in that new postpartum phase within like the first year after Hazel was born, and I was really struggling. I was having struggles with chronic pain was the biggest thing. But I was also experiencing hemorrhoids, and I was experiencing some like a little bit of leaking, not too much, but the pain was the biggest thing for me. And I just felt like I couldn't do the things that I loved. I was really active in CrossFit at that time, and I felt like it was really hindering my workouts. And the more that I thought I knew, the more my pain created and got worse. And so I came across somebody, hey Pam, I came across someone who was teaching trainers about postpartum training, and her name is Jessie Mundell, and I was like hooked. I was like, oh my God, finally somebody's telling me, you know, what's wrong with my body. And there's nothing wrong with my body, but at that time I felt like there really was. And so I was learning about all these things. And so the pelvic floor was really like that aha moment. And since I've learned about this, I mean, it's been 5 years now of taking courses and certifications, mentoring under physiotherapists, working alongside physiotherapists, and learning as much as I can, taking courses that are really only physiotherapy courses, but I take them anyways, even though they're just educational to me. I don't really actually get anything out of them in terms of certifications or acknowledgement. It's just for my own passion, but also my own ability to be able to pass it along to you. So I love the pelvic floor. And so this is why, and most people don't know a lot about the pelvic floor, even if they've been to pelvic health physiotherapy. Sometimes there's a lot of therapists out there that still don't educate a lot and give you the, hey Melody, hey Shauna, give you the ability to, apply this knowledge to your own body, which is really important for me. I want to empower you to have the knowledge and have the ability to take this information and use it on yourself and learn and grow and feel in your body what's right for you, because this information, again, is just that. It's just an information. Every single one of us is so different in our experience, whether it's our pregnancy experience, our postpartum, our injuries, our health, like everything. There's so many factors that play into pelvic health that it's important that we understand how to apply all of this on an individual basis. So today what we're going to talk about is how to connect to the pelvic floor, why I feel like it's important. We'll go over the anatomy of the pelvic floor, the pelvis a little bit, and then we can answer questions. So if you have questions along the way, type them in, and then I will answer them as I get a chance, okay? So, say hello to my beautiful pelvis. We call her Portia because we want our pelvis and our pelvic floor to be running like a Porsche, a well-oiled, high-quality machine. All right, so this is our pelvis. This is the female pelvis. You can see there's the vagina and the pelvic floor and the urethra and the anus down here. And also too, you're gonna have to get used to using terms and hearing me use terms like that too, because vagina, anus, urethra, clitoris, all those things, they're not bad words, okay? It's just part of our body. And I use it all the time. And when we're talking about pelvic floor dysfunction, and we're talking about things that hinder down in the pelvic floor, we need to not be embarrassed about talking about these things, because the more information that we can have about specifics, about what's going on, like, well, I have pain on the outside of my vagina, or I have pain in my clitoris, or I have pain on my anus, or my, describing where hemorrhoids are, or I have heaviness or bulginess in my perineum, that sort of thing. The perineum is the space between the anus and the vagina. We need to be able to talk about those things without being embarrassed, and we need to be comfortable sharing that information with our therapist or our coach so that we can really figure out what's what and how to best help you. So bottom look of that bowl, right? This is our pelvis, our pelvic bones. You can see those muscles like extend and they cover and they fit like a bowl or a sling in the bottom. And you can see on the inside here, we have our bladders right here. This is our uterus and fallopian tubes, and then back here is our bowel. And so you can see that the pelvic floor really is like a nest for our pelvic organs. It supports those organs. It's a very important vital role to keeping these where they need to be in order to function best. And you can see if I take these out, the pelvic floor muscles don't just sit at the bottom. They wrap right into the tops of the hip bones, right? So they wrap right in here. You can see on the front, this is our pubic symphysis right here. They wrap all the way up inside the pelvis, and they create a full encompassing bowl. So it's not a small group of muscles. And in fact, this group of muscles is the only group of muscles that has 5 different functions. Let's see if I can remember them all. So it is a support function. So support, they all start with an S, so hopefully I can remember it. So they support our pelvic organs. When they lose this support, so through pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, hormonal changes, consistent habits and tendencies, we can lose support in these muscles, and that means that these organs can descend, and that's what happens when we have prolapse, is these descend down further than they should be, and that's called prolapse. There's different stages of that. We have sphincters. So we have sphincters for peeing, pooping, sexual function. Sexual function is another one. So we've got sump pumps, we've got sphincters, we've got support. Wait, I said sump pumps and I haven't done that. So the pelvic floor actually pumps fluid away from the pelvis. So it actually helps sump fluids away from the pelvis. Don't ask me how, that part I don't really know. I just know that it does that. So it supports our pelvic organs. It has sphincters for our bladder and our bowels. It provides us with sexual function. It provides us a sump pump. And what else? Support. I'll think of it. There's one other one, but it has 5 functions. So it's a really important group of muscles, and it gets very little attention from most doctors, most people. They don't really understand that. Oh, stability, right? Helps keep our pelvis stable, right? It helps hold these bones and the cartilage and stuff where it's supposed to be or where it should be, ideally. And so that's the other function, is stability. I knew I'd remember it. So obviously during pregnancy and after pregnancy and into postpartum, for various amount of reasons, this pelvic floor takes a beating, right? It can lose support due to hormones, pressure, but also during habits. So something that I talk a lot about with people is I ask, like, do you push when you pee? Do you push a lot when you poop? Especially if you're constipated and you have that constant pressure. In one of the courses that I took, they equate being constipated, especially in severe cases, to labor. It is like a mini delivery of a child and a mini delivery of the labor, because these muscles have to separate so much and the pressure is so great that it can cause the same damage as actually having a baby if you are constipated and you do it often enough over and over and over again. Awesome. I'm going to get back to your stuff in a minute, Melody. So that's really important to understand, that it's not just pregnancy and postpartum, but it's also our habits. Do we hold our breath and like bear down when we're exercising? Do we hold our breath a lot? I talk to a lot of people and they're like, yeah, I do. I hold my breath a lot when I exercise. That can cause pressure to go downwards towards the pelvic floor, especially if the pelvic floor is kind of the weak link in our core system, which we'll talk about in a second. Then that habit of holding your breath and sending that constant pressure down over time can cause that support and that stability and the ability for it to function to go out the window or to reduce, right? So lots of different factors in our pelvic floor health. So the reason we do the pelvic floor connection breath is because we want to be able to retrain or train these muscles to do what we want. And what we want them to do is we want them to move dynamically. A lot of times they can get stuck. They can get stuck up high, or they can just kind of forget to do what they're supposed to do after pregnancy, and they can just kind of hang out there and not really do what they're supposed to do. But they're like any muscle. They should move up and down and side to side and create space and contract and relax and all these different things. So the core connection breath is a really great way to do that, but it's also a really great way for you to slow down, to reconnect your brain to your body. And that might not make sense for some of you, but if our brain isn't sending a signal or the right signals down to a muscle, then it's not going to do what we want it to do. And so we have to retrain our brain to tell our muscle what we want it to do. And it adapts quite quickly, but during pregnancy, our body adapts in a lot of different ways that we don't really recognize because we've got so much going on. We can't pay attention most of the time to what's happening all over our body. So when that pregnancy is over and we can start reconnecting to our body, that's what I like to call it, is like the reconnection phase. And that can happen at any time. It doesn't have to happen immediately and then you're screwed. You can come back to that. But the core connection breath is a great way to connect back to our core canister, understand what our habits and our tendencies are around breathing, our pelvic floor, our abdominals, our diaphragm, all these things. So that's your pelvic floor. Now, how does this all tune in to breath? So our diaphragm is up here, okay? And our diaphragm, when we breathe in, it flattens out and it elongates like this to let our lungs get larger. And then as we exhale, it comes back up like this and pushes the air out. So it comes out and in and out and in. When it does that, we want our pelvic floor to do the same way. When we inhale, we want the pelvic floor to create space and lengthen and soften. And then as we exhale, we want it to rise gently and push out. So we want to train that system to do that, and we do that through breath. And so I totally need this breath reminder. Most people do. And it's something you can always come back to, which is great because it's super simple. It does take practice. But once you get the hang of it, it's something that you just will start doing automatically. You won't even know that you're doing it, which is kind of the point. So when we inhale, we want to create space in our lungs, in our ribs, but send that breath all the way down to the pelvis. And obviously the air doesn't actually come out of our lungs and go all the way down to the pelvis, but you want to imagine sending that breath all the way down to that pelvic floor and allowing that connection to air, let everything create space and soften. And then as we exhale, we lift gently. So don't clench. You'll hear a lot of people say, like, just do your Kegels and hold it as long as you can. And no, we don't want to do that because then things can get stuck and they can get too tight. We want to have, just like any other muscle, would you constantly walk around like, clench my bicep and then open, clench my bicep? No, we can do this throughout the day and not worry about it, right? Same with your pelvic floor. You don't want to clench it. You just want to engage and relax, okay? So we inhale, we let that all soften, create space, and then as we exhale, we lift and engage, and we just bring it, think about everything coming up, and then it all comes down. Come up and come down. And when you're lifting and engaging the pelvic floor, I want you to think about doing it from the perineum, okay? So that space between the vagina and the anus, because then what that does is that helps you to create that space down and up through the whole bowl. So when you do a Kegel, a lot of times people tell you, well, just stop your pee. Well, if you just stop your pee, you're kind of just engaging this part here, and we want you to engage that whole bowl, right? It goes all the way from the tailbone to the front and all sides, right? So you don't want to just create space and engage here. You want to do it for the whole bowl. So if you think about the perineum, like lifting a Kleenex from the perineum, or lifting a blueberry at the perineum, or sucking through a straw, like sucking a milkshake through the straw, there's lots of different cues that you can give yourself to think about lifting from the perineum, okay? And like I said, it's a lift and a contraction, but it's not a clench. It's not a hard clench, okay? So I think it was Tara, she was saying that she feels the most connection with this when she's in child's pose, which is great. Some people feel it great standing up, sitting down, laying down flat, laying on their bellies. I like to lay with my feet together and my knees open in like a butterfly position. I feel that that's really great. And, you know, when we're talking pelvic floor, sometimes you got to get personal with yourselves. Sometimes you got to lay there, and if you're finding that you're having a hard time connecting, then you can put your fingertips right inside of like the pubic bone or like your inner thighs, and you can kind of like put your fingers in there and start to feel, you know, the muscles moving down there. It's a very slight movement. It should be a slight movement. You can also do an internal exam yourself. Whether you have a toy or you want to use your own fingers, you can do an internal, practice for yourself so that you can start to feel those muscles. Don't be shy. You're just learning your body. It's all self-efficacy. It means that you're just being able to tune into what your body really needs and teaching yourself how to do it. All right, so Melody says, I was paying close attention to how I was feeling while doing jumping jacks today. Initially, I feel pressure and heaviness in my perineum and anus for the first few seconds, and then it goes away. Cool. So what that tells me likely is that your body is responding to the load and the, what's the word that I'm looking for? The demands that you're placing on it. And so your pelvic floor is lifting and engaging while you're doing that automatically. If it's going away, if that heaviness is going away, then chances are it's because it's lifting. I mean, obviously I can't tell for sure because I don't have a machine watching what your insides are doing, but that would be my assumption, would be that your pelvic floor is naturally doing what it's supposed to by lifting and supporting you while you're doing that. Having said that, though, then we need to make sure that when you're done, you allow that pelvic floor to relax, because it might not relax on its own. It might feel like it needs to stay up there. It needs to stay up there protecting you. But when that happens, if you guys watched, if any of you are members and you were in the members Facebook group, Lisa did a chat the other day, and what she reminded everybody was that those muscles, if they're constantly up, they can get stuck up there and they can forget that they need to also come down. It's just like our bicep, right? If we walked around for a week or a month or whatever with our bicep like this, it would think we wanted it to stay there. And then we'd have a really hard time undoing that tension, right? So it would take, probably weeks and months for our bicep to feel back to normal. So the same thing applies with our pelvic floor, which is again why this breath is so important. The breath isn't just to help you contract and engage your pelvic floor. It's also to help you tune into what it feels like to allow your pelvis to create space and relax and descend. Because if you're like me, your pelvic floor is always stuck up there. And some of us are like that. It's very common in people that have a lot of stress. It's very common in people who are athletic and do a lot of impactful type movements. And just like any muscle, if it's too weak or too tight, it can cause pain. It can lose its ability to function the way it wants. And that's when we can start to have things like leaking. And that leaking, just a reminder for everybody, that leaking doesn't just always come from a weak pelvic floor. It can also come from a too tight pelvic floor. So it's really important to understand the basics of the pelvic floor, how to connect to it via breath, because that's the easiest way to do it. But then also to understand that there's, the same symptoms can arise from different things. If you've never been to a pelvic floor physio before, I highly encourage you to book with Lisa. She is my pelvic floor physiotherapist here at the studio. She is still doing telehealth appointments. So it's like a video, like a Zoom call, where you can see each other, and she'll get you to do different self palpations and talk through your habits and that sort of thing. So it's still very helpful, even though she's not able to do an internal exam right now. There's still a lot of information that she can give to you while doing a telehealth appointment. So you can book those directly via the website at empowerfit.ca. There's a little, if you go to the drop-down menu, there's a box there for physiotherapy, and you can still book with Lisa for those appointments. Lacey, I feel that pressure doing full sit-ups. Should I do them slower and exhale slower on the up? So you feel the pressure on the way up is when you feel that pressure, or do you feel it on the way down, or do you feel that pressure through the whole motion? Let me know, and then I'll be better to answer that. So when we're doing this breath, we can apply this breath to exercise. You don't have to. Yes, okay. So Lacey says that she feels pressure when she is coming up on the sit-up. So what I would suggest is, yes, trying that first. So she said, should she do them slower and exhale slower on the up? So actually, no, what I would do first is I would actually, at the bottom, I would do a full exhale, engage my pelvic floor, exhale, and then sit up. I would try that first. Then if that feels good, then you can play around with other options. Then you can also try doing them slower and exhaling slower, or exhaling more forcefully on the way up. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. There really, unfortunately, is no rhyme or reason or like concrete answers or like basic answers across the board. Everybody's a little bit different. So the way Lacey feels this might feel different, and the response that she has to changing her breath and changing her movement could be different than somebody else. So you have to try lots of different things. And if you find one way that works, that's great. But we want to have variety. We don't want to always do the same thing all the time, unless it's the only way that works for now. That's great. But we always want to be looking for variety, because if we have variety, then that means our body will never adapt to one way. Typically what happens is if we do the same thing over and over and over and over again, whether it's good or bad, our body adapts, and sometimes that adaptation, without us understanding, can cause other things to kind of go awry. And so while we think we're doing this great thing, it can cause something else to go not so good, and then we're just working, to fix that, and then something else happens. So you want to always try to have variety, whether it's breath or movement or exercise or whatever it is. You want to have as much variety as you can. So the first thing that I always suggest is with the breath, if you're having a hard time doing the breath at the same time as the movement and you're having symptoms or it gets confusing, then I want you to exhale and then go. So blow, then go. Once you've got the blow, then go nailed down, then you can blow and go at the same time. Does that make sense to everybody? Can you give me some thumbs up if that makes sense? So when you're learning this for the first time and you're applying it to a squat, I want you to blow, so exhale, and then rise. So you're going to go down to the bottom of your squat, exhale, gently lift the pelvic floor, and then rise. Good. Then once you get really great at doing that, then you'll come down and then you'll exhale and rise at the same time. It's just kind of a progression, just like any other exercise or any other thing that you might do. You kind of always start at the basic version, and then you layer on and make it a little bit more intense or, engaged, for lack of a better word. So yeah, so that's the whole on the pelvic floor, you guys. God, I could talk for weeks about this. There's so much, there's so many questions. And obviously it goes way deeper than just a 30-minute talk. But I want everybody to practice that breath. I want everybody to watch the replay if you're chiming in late or you haven't watched it. And I want you to let me know what other questions you might have. Maybe you're experiencing symptoms. Maybe you went to a pelvic floor physio once, but it really wasn't the greatest experience for you and you're really not. But I'm sorry, Ben was just trying to call me. But I want you to also to consider checking in with Lisa, booking an appointment with her. She can do a ton of support. And again, I'm only a piece of the puzzle. I'm only a piece of the system. Lisa's the expert when it comes to this. And I always recommend that everybody see a pelvic floor physio at some point to just elevate your experience and your opportunity to get well. All right, so if you have questions, put them in the comments. I will be back later to answer them. Practice your core connection breath. We're going to talk about how it applies to exercise later. Talk to you guys later. Happy day 2.